Hi, everyone. Welcome to Confidently Be You. My name is Jennifer Shlomovich, and today my special guest is Marion Nixon, who is an advanced emotional freedom techniques practitioner with 20 years of experience in complementary health. She now works as a positive mindset coach focused on helping businesswomen overcome self-doubt and imposter syndrome so they can make their heart dream become real without struggling with procrastination and feeling like a fraud. Welcome, Marion.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
It's nice to have you here. So today we're going to talk about a really important topic, which is the impact beliefs have on shaping our reality. And this is something I certainly didn't realize until I started becoming a coach, just how much our beliefs really impact who we are and how we navigate life.
Yes, and those beliefs start in childhood. In the first 7 years of our lives, we actually lay down a blueprint for our lives and what we believe is possible, permissible, and how things should get done, what's right, what's wrong, and what's acceptable. And that gets buried in the subconscious mind and guides us through the rest of our life. But the good news is that we can actually change that blueprint. So if you've got limiting beliefs, where if as a child you didn't get the validation that you needed, and so you don't believe very strongly in yourself and your capabilities, that can be changed. If you were lucky enough to have a family that validated you and supported you and made you feel great and praised you for the stuff you got right, then you will go through life believing in yourself much more effectively than somebody who didn't have that support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes these things also can happen unintentionally from parents.
Oh, yes, I think most of it is unintentional.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm a recovering people pleaser because I always felt like everyone was better than me, and I always put other people on a pedestal. And part of that, I think, was just because my parents were overprotective in some ways, so they meant well. But I think, that had an imprint on me being afraid to make decisions for myself, and it instilled that type of belief. So before we dive into this topic, what inspired you to get into the work that you do?
Well, when I started my training in complementary health, I had a lot of self-doubt myself. And I started out with a hobby practice. Then I was retrenched from my 9-to-5 and struggled to find another job which would give me the same income that I'd had. And I had a house to pay off and a car to pay off. So I couldn't actually take a drop in salary. So I decided that I would take my hobby business and turn it into a full-time practice. And so then I started adding other modalities, and one of them was craniosacral therapy. And in a module on trauma, I suddenly realized that I was carrying a lot of trauma, although nothing bad had happened to me as a child. And then, now, having had my interest in trauma peaked, I then discovered emotional freedom techniques, which is also very effective for dealing with trauma. And over the years, as I've peeled the layers off my own onion, I've realized that I'm not alone in the world, that there are plenty of other women who have the same issues with self-doubt. And a few years ago, I discovered a thing called childhood emotional neglect. And that is unintentional emotional neglect from your family, where outwardly nothing is wrong, but just because of choice of circumstances, or maybe your parents both worked and you had a nanny, or you were in a creche, a play school, whatever, and you didn't get the emotional support that you needed in the way that you needed it. So nobody was doing anything wrong or being mean or nasty. It was just a mismatch circumstantial mismatch. And so you grew up without that validation, without feeling supported. And that has a huge emotional impact and creates a lot of limiting beliefs. And so I discovered that for myself, and that explained a lot of the way that I was coping, not with life, and the things that I avoided doing because I just didn't have the confidence to do them. And the things that I knew I was good at, but I didn't know how to really acknowledge that to myself, never mind to my clients, because I didn't have that self-confidence. And then, so having discovered that helped me address it more directly. And so over the last few years, I've cleared many layers of that onion, and then discovered that the imposter syndrome is actually also a real thing and has very, very similar effect to the effect that the childhood emotional neglect had on me. And so I'm now including working with women who have that problem, in addition to just sort of general self-doubt, which there's two layers to, we all have times where we go through self-doubt, but the difference with imposter syndrome is that it's all pervading and it's always there, and you never really acknowledge anything that you've done well. Even though you might be getting awards, you might be getting a lot of praise and recognition and promotion if you're in a corporate job and whatever, but you just put it all down to fluke, to luck, and you live in a state of anxiety about being found out to be a fraud. So it's a much more intense version of self-doubt than the average self-doubt, which can itself be very limiting, and it needs to be dealt with. But it doesn't have the same intensity of anxiety that the imposter syndrome has.
I can relate so much to all of the things that you just shared. And yeah, it's an ongoing process. I used to think, okay, let me just fix this layer within myself and then I'll be better. And then just when you think you overcame something, you realize
there's another layer.
There's another layer to that too. And then I'm like, didn't I take care of this with myself already? And so one of the things I've learned in the past couple of years is just really embracing the fact that there's always going to be some level of it. And maybe it's not going to have the same level of intensity that it used to have. And it might show up differently. So like what you said about imposter syndrome, having a business and creating something from nothing, that can trigger a lot of imposter syndrome for sure. And I've spoken to a lot of other women who are creators and business owners, and it's very intimidating. And then I'll speak to somebody who looks like they have it all together and someone you admire, and then you find out they also have the same insecurities that you have. It's like building a muscle when it comes to self-doubt and imposter syndrome. And I never really thought about them as being related but separate things, but they are kind of like two separate categories within the same realm of stuff. Is that you might not be someone who struggles with self-doubt so much anymore, but then there's that imposter syndrome piece. And it's like building a muscle where the more you start challenging it, the stronger you get at not allowing that fear to hold you back anymore.
Yes. And there are different ways to deal with that. But just before I go on to that, the idea of peeling the onion, I used to get very frustrated about the fact that there was always another layer. And then one day I just decided, you know what? It's obvious that this onion never ends. So just stop expecting it to get to the bottom of it. You're going to be peeling layers off forever.
The never ending.
They made it easier for me, because then I stopped looking to get to the end of it. And it just became an ongoing exploration. And as you say, it gets less intense. And yeah, so, and the issues are less big, but there's always, there are some people who talk about a core wounding that we all know. So as we work through all the different issues that we have, there's a core wounding that we keep coming back to. And that has many layers to just that one thing. In emotional freedom techniques, we talk about aspects that, you know, and you think you've cleared something, but what you've done is you've cleared an aspect of it, and there may be a different facet to it, a slightly different way of looking at it, feeling it, experiencing it. And so, yes, we often come back to, and it is very often one core experience that keeps coming up and keeps coming up in different forms.
That it's very interesting how our mind retains all these things throughout our life.
Well, it's what it is our it's all these things are buried in our subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind is wired to keep us safe. And the interesting thing about it is that 95% of our thinking capacity is in the subconscious mind. So all those busy thoughts that we're aware of in the conscious mind is only 5% of the thinking that can go on in our heads. And that 95% is actually what keeps us going. That's, if you think about the amount of information that is actually coming into us at any given moment through our eyes, our ears, nose, touch, smell, taste, our awareness of what's going around us. If we had to be aware of every single thing, every little piece of information that was coming in, we would never get anything done. We'd be completely overwhelmed. And that's where habit and routine and things come in as well. We get kind of programmed into doing things where we don't even have to think about it. We just do it. And that's the role of the subconscious, to help us get through life. So our conscious mind is the one that's kind of looking around and getting new ideas and thinking through things. And the subconscious mind is just keeping us going. And part of that is keeping us safe. And so it absorbs all this information. As I said, the blueprint starts in childhood, but it gets added to along the way. And that is there. So it's keeping us safe and alerting us to doing, when we're going to do things that in the past maybe haven't worked for us, or they've created a feeling of insecurity and being unsure of ourselves. And so it alerts us to what I call it, it's a don't go there message that it sends us. And it's even things like procrastination. We're procrastinating because for a reason. And yes, we can use our conscious mind to talk ourselves into doing stuff, or to, you know, but it's hard work. And the same with that self-doubt. A lot of the therapies available use the conscious mind to kind of reason yourself through it. But that doesn't take the message out of your subconscious. And I look at it like a doorbell. When you push the button, the trigger, and the alarm rings. Now, most coaching and therapies will help you to either work through the noise of the alarm, or they'll try and help you to dull it down, to make the noise less intense. The emotional freedom techniques that I use cut the wire. So that there's no longer an emotional connection between the trigger and the alarm, the memory. So for instance, public speaking. That makes most people nervous. Now, if you go back, that will go back to some other memory where that made you feel not good enough, or afraid that people will reject you, they'll boo you, they'll laugh at you, they won't listen to you. There's some memory attached to the idea of standing up and speaking in front of a group of people that makes you nervous. So if you disconnect the memory of that, the emotion from that memory, when you stand up to speak to people, you don't have that child part of you in your subconscious mind saying, don't do this, this was horrible, and don't do it again. You can just stand there, and you might well be nervous. And that's what I call good nerves, because when you're in a situation like that, you actually want a little bit of butterflies in your tummy to make you hyper alert, give you a bit of energy and vigor to a presentation, because you want to come across as an energetic person. So you want a little bit of that energy that comes from being nervous, but you're not overwhelmed by it, because your subconscious mind isn't sending you danger messages all the time.
I love your analogy about the doorbell. That makes a lot of sense. And that sounds like really powerful work that you do with being able to cut that wire. And that's also been my experience with coaching. I've gone through therapy for myself and coaching. And it's interesting, when I went to my coach training, I went there for, to get a certification and build on my career. And I didn't realize the Pandora's box I was going to open. Because I'm like, what is this? We wouldn't do it. Because in the program, we're coaching each other, and all of a sudden all this stuff starts coming up. And I hadn't been in therapy in a long time. And I had to go back to therapy to kind of deal with some of the things that got brought up from that. And so coaching and therapy, they have their similarities and their differences, and they can work very well together when you're digging deep with a lot of that stuff. And coaching definitely took work that I had in therapy to like a whole other level, because it brought up that subconscious stuff that you don't realize is lurking back there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because we're not aware of it. You can only access it through either triggering it because through some current situation, or through a memory. And what I like about emotional freedom techniques is that you don't go back into the past immediately. You start with, for instance, let's stay with the public speaking. You've got a presentation to do and you're very nervous and you come for help. Mm-hmm. I will deal with how you're feeling about the presentation you're about to give next week. And as the intensity of those feelings subside, I'll say, when did you feel like this before? And then we'll deal through a visualization technique. We will deal with that memory. Mm-hmm. And then I'll say to you, and when was the very first time you felt like this? And then we'll go back. That should be early childhood. Mm-hmm. 90% of the time, these fears and limiting beliefs go back to something that happened in early childhood. And with visualization, the subconscious brain works with pictures and feelings. So it's not connected to external reality. And it accepts whatever pictures you give it as real. So we go back to the original memory and we imagine a different scenario, a new outcome, or we bring in other people or a person to be a support person for the little one, so that they have the resources to cope with the situation they're in. And so the child no longer feels isolated, alone, scared, whatever. And we imprint into, there's a process for imprinting the new feelings. Mm-hmm. And that takes the doorbell analogy a bit further. Now we're taking the wire from the button and connecting it to a new bell with a different positive message. So that when the next time you do that, when you get to doing that presentation, instead of the frightened child and the child feeling rejected and humiliated, saying in the back of your head, saying, don't go there, don't go there. You've got a little one that's remembering the teacher praising them, or their classmates clapping, or getting an award for doing the best oral in class or whatever. And so then you can do the presentation from a completely different emotional place.
We're basically rewiring our brains when we start doing this work with ourselves. Yeah. That's really powerful. Are there any other techniques that can help change mindset? Yes,
they're not ones that I know about them rather than having experienced them. There's one which, and hypnosis can do it. There's a particular form of hypnosis called it's RTT. It's rapid something therapy. Went out of my head. That I know a couple of practitioners of that particular form of hypnosis, and from the explanations they've given me, it also works very well. And yeah, I've seen demonstrations of EMDR, that eye movement therapy. That's used more for trauma. Okay. I mean, EFT is used for trauma as well, but I'm not sure if EMDR would be used for sort of just generally dealing with things that aren't classified as trauma. So although in my book everything goes back to childhood, what we call little t traumas, that are not the big stuff, but the small events that from an adult perspective aren't traumatic. They're just kind of life. But because the child is small and the emotions are overwhelming, it makes a big impact on the child. Sure. And leaves an impression that lasts a lifetime. So those are little t traumas that, then those are often the ones that are really problematic. Because with the big T trauma, people know the child's traumatized and they usually do something, well, mostly they do something about it. Yeah, this is also very interesting. And you help women connect with their heart dream. And so how can one connect with their heart dream and take action towards it? A heart dream is a term that I've coined to describe that big dream, that impossible dream that often lurks in, and you've almost given up dreaming it because it doesn't seem possible to make it real. And it could be because it's so big, you don't know how to even begin to act on it, or that in growing up, you developed a belief that it's not permissible to do something like that. And you're a lot younger than I am, but I grew up in a time of life where work for women was limited to certain fields. And there was other things that firefighting, engineering, science to some extent were not regarded as suitable professions for women. And so for me, there was not that I wanted to do any of those particular things, but there was a mindset of certain things not being permissible. Not just, some things were not possible, but other things were not permissible. So that's another limiting belief that you get. And so if you've got a heart dream that for one of those reasons, you've actually not allowed yourself to dream. It can be sometimes quite hard to access it. So I have a particular program that I use, which helps people to access that heart dream. And then once we've got it open, we look at the limiting beliefs and we remove those. And we look at where the person is at now in their life and what can they use from their present situation as building blocks to start, or stepping stones to start working towards their real dream.
That's really powerful. Oh, sorry.
No, that's I was just going to say, I had a client that who is doing what, and usually the people, you know, they're not unhappy doing what they're doing. You don't have to be unhappily in the whatever work or career you've chosen. But there's this other thing that won't quite go away, but it just kind of lurks. And very often you can actually create a bridge from where you are to where you want to be. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the term heart dream. I think that's a beautiful phrase. and yeah, it's kind of like if their parents told them they have to be a lawyer growing up, or they want them to be a lawyer and a doctor, but deep down they always wanted to be an artist. So there's that like fear of, I can't do that because there's that residual stuff from those expectations that those parents had placed on it, on them. So yeah, and I think we all get caught up with things in life where we feel like there's something deep down that we want to do, but we're like, oh, I can't do that, whether it's a business or a hobby, or you may not think you have the time for it. Something that I recently started doing this past February, I took a little break from my channel just to kind of recollect myself and reorganize myself a little bit. And I realized that I stopped doing things for fun because everything's been about work and all of my responsibilities and my business and family. And I realized I had to give myself permission just to do something for the sake of fun. So I bought a puzzle. I used to love doing puzzles, and I started putting together a puzzle, and I would take a break for like 30 minutes after, work. And I would sit with a cup of tea and I'd work on my puzzle for a little bit, and then I would do something productive. But it can even be something so simple as just having fun again, just because I think we feel like something has to have some kind of productive outcome. But sometimes you just want to do something to feel good.
Yes. And feeling good will in fact have a good effect on your outcome.
Absolutely.
Your productivity, because it regenerates your energy and it stimulates your creativity.
That's very true. Yeah.
And when I did have a 9-to-5 job still, I was working in a company there was an engineering company, and there was a research department, and one of the senior engineers, his job was actually to be a sounding board for other people and for some of the others. And when they had a problem they couldn't resolve, they would discuss it with him, and you'd see him walking up and down the corridor. And I was actually running the library for the research unit. And sometimes he would come into the library and he'd sit and read. And then suddenly he'd look up and you'd know he'd had an idea. And he actually said to me that it was taking his mind off the problem that allowed his subconscious mind to look for alternative solutions. When you keep looking in one direction, you're convinced that this is the answer and how can I make it work? Sometimes you get stuck.
Yeah.
If you give yourself, have some fun, let your mind get creative. How many times have you had, woken up in the middle of the night with the answer to a question, or first thing in the morning is for me. I'll go to bed and I'll say, no, I really need some inspiration on this. It might not happen the next morning, but I think in that somewhere in that waking, that gap between being asleep and being awake, when you're not quite either, that's when I get my ideas. Some people get them in the shower.
Yeah, that happens to me sometimes too, like sleeping or shower.
Yeah. So that playtime, if you want to call it that, is very, very important. You know, the old adage about all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Well, it makes Jill a dull girl too.
This is so true. Yeah, it's so important to have that playtime. I think as we become adults who become so busy with everything in life, we forget that, we have to give ourselves permission to have that playtime, even if it's just 30 minutes, just doing something for the sake of enjoying it, that it helps you feel better. And yeah, absolutely. My creativity has definitely spiked up more since, and it's definitely been helpful. So this has been a great conversation. Before we wrap up, what are some resources that you would like to recommend for viewers?
And this journey has largely been one that I've explored with using emotional freedom techniques and a related process called matrix re-imprinting, which is basically emotional freedom techniques plus a lot more visualization processes.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't really explored alternative for dealing with imposter syndrome and self-doubt. As I said, that RTT form of hypnosis sounds good. I have come across somebody called Valerie Young, a Dr. Valerie Young, who has written quite a lot about, and she's done a lot of YouTube videos, and she's got a TED talk and stuff. What I have come across in my reading on imposter syndrome is that a lot of the sort of solutions are just kind of embrace your success, focus on it, allow yourself to feel it and internalize it. And I'm thinking, if that's exactly what you're struggling with, being told to do that doesn't feel very helpful to me. It just feels like more struggle.
Yeah.
Which is why I love emotional freedom techniques, because you don't have to struggle.
Yeah, struggling is not fun at all.
Yeah, and the same with self-doubt, where people say, well, just keep saying those positive affirmations. I tried that in the early days. I got fed up because I had so much dissonance. There's a little voice in my head saying, that's not true, that's not true. But I'm trying to say this. And it just caused so much internal turmoil that I gave it up. And it was for me to find, I think that's why the EFT, the emotional freedom techniques, was such a revelation to me, because suddenly here was something that actually worked, because you start off by acknowledging how and validating how you feel. You take the judgment out. And when you stop resisting, because so often we feel bad about the way that we're feeling. So we're actually trying to make ourselves not feel like that. But that sets up an internal tug of war. And then, the old saying that, what you resist persists. So as long as you try, you're trying to squash this or make it go away, all you're doing is actually keeping yourself in a self-perpetuating loop.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can stop, when you can stop and say, so this is the way that I feel, and I'm still a good person, I'm still okay, I still like myself. There's a kind of, for me, I can just feel a lightness, a kind of letting go. Phew, it's okay. I can still be okay and feel like I'm not capable of doing this. And then that opens it up for me to be able to say, okay, well, how else can I deal with this? if you're feeling, and how else would I like to feel about this? And then start to use techniques, or to look around and say, well, actually, if you're feeling, I've done something similar, and that seemed to work okay. So maybe I am capable of doing this. So then the positive feedback for yourself can start to work. But for me, the first thing always is to stop judging yourself for the way that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes possible to look at options.
Absolutely.
And so there are other things out there, but I haven't explored them in depth, because for me, emotional freedom techniques has worked, and it's effective, it's quick. And because you don't go digging around, it's actually, particularly for when there's trauma involved, you don't go back into the trauma. So you don't have to open up all those feelings.
Yeah, that's really powerful work. And, there's no one size fits all. That's why there's so many different modalities for different things. And when you find the thing that works for you, it's such a relief, because, and again, it doesn't mean I used to feel like there was something wrong with me when a certain business technique or marketing technique didn't work for me. And I realized, well, that there's so many other ones out there.
There are. So, maybe for some people, the affirmations work.
Yeah.
As I said, they've been around a long time. A lot of people use them. So maybe other people find them easier to use than I did. Access consciousness has some processes for clearing limiting and unhelpful beliefs. And the RTT, that form of hypnosis, that seems to be very powerful, and it's quicker than normal hypnosis, which is quite a long-term therapy apparently. But the RTT, well, the R stands for rapid, and it's rapid transformation therapy. That's the middle T. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for. Sorry.
Yeah, so that would probably be the other one that I would recommend. And there's always the conventional, the psychotherapy and stuff.
Well, this is all great. Thank you for sharing all of these other resources that people could look into. And thank you for your time and talking about all of this really important work. And before we wrap up, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
My website, which is basically my name, it's www.marionnixon as one word, .co.za.
Okay.
And also my LinkedIn page is also a profile, is where I'm most active on social media.
Okay.
And that's LinkedIn, and again, my name, but this time hyphenated. And then I just need to double check that there's a number at the end of it.
I can also I'll include the links too in the bottom of the video notes too.
Okay, so then that LinkedIn one is, so it's linkedin.com Marion-Nixon-5346 lowercase a 415. Okay,
great. So yeah, I'll also leave that information in the notes below if you want to connect with Marion.
And I am on Facebook. I don't use it extensively, but they could always contact me via Messenger as well. Okay.
All right, great. Well, Marion, thank you so much for stopping by today and talking about this. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you watching also did as well. And take care, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks again, Marion.
Thanks.